All right, very exciting. It's Halitics, and I think we're on. We're actually live now, Vernon. We had a little bit of trouble here. I didn't set one setting the way I was supposed to set it, and so we're starting a little late, but it's great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining me, Vern.
My pleasure always, Hal.
Hey, so what kind of brought us together today was I think you were watching my live stream where I acknowledged a point that Arlen was making. I think it was a little over a week ago, where I said that the Democrats, for all the areas where I criticized them for, they are better. I said I accepted them as better on the issue of reproductive rights, choice that is, and you took a little bit of issue with that. So we're going to get into that conversation. I hope. Is that something you're ready to discuss? Whether,
Sure.
in your view,
Sure.
there's a real meaningful difference between the parties on the issue of abortion, reproductive rights, and the like?
Sure, you kind of misrepresented how this all started, but
Oh, I always do. I always do. I was asking if that's fair. So
sure. No, that's fine. Take it away. What I actually said is that where it comes to the question of reproductive rights, you've taken not you, but in general, everybody's taken a very complicated issue and oversimplified what's going on. But take it away.
Well, I don't want to go there. That's going to be later in the program. I wanted to kind of set that as the table because because the thumbnail that I used actually, and we'll show it. We kind of started the program before we were talking about war and peace, and now we're going to talk about reproductive rights. I do want to get into the war and peace issue, but I thought it would be a little confusing for viewers because I did promote this program as one in which we compare the records of the Democrats and the Republicans on the issue of choice, reproductive rights. And the thumbnail does show three high-profile races. Obviously, the most high-profile coming up next month are Arlen Vernon, and I've got your name right. At least I got the name right. It says Vernon Bohr, iconoclast. But you can see three of those high-profile races. The most important, the presidential in the middle. I have Kamala above Trump. She's actually leading in the polls. To the left, I've got the Maryland Senate race where Angela Alsobrooks below. And I kind of did a Brady Bunch thing where I tried to have the man, woman, although I didn't do it on the right side because I don't know, I was playing around with this, but Alsobrooks actually is ahead in the polls and she's the Democrat. And I think it's a dead heat as far as I can tell in Wisconsin. I may be wrong on that. But the reason I bring up the issue of rights, reproductive rights, is as much as I've been calling for folks, Vernon, to maybe sit this election out, or better yet, what I want them to do is vote green. I do think, from my perspective, it does matter when it comes to reproductive rights. And for that reason, I would be inclined perhaps to vote for the Democrats in some of the non-presidential races. Do you think there isn't a meaningful difference between them, or are you saying what I think you're saying, which is the issue is a lot more complex than those of us in media make it out to be?
Yeah, what do you mean? First of all, you scrambled my brain, Hal. What do you mean by reproductive rights? That's kind of a euphemism.
That people can make decisions about when they engage in sexual activities, whether there will be a pregnancy, whether they can protect themselves against a communicable disease, and if there is a pregnancy, whether the woman can, and I do not use the term birthing person. I know some people do. I think if you are able to become pregnant, then that makes you a woman. So call in and yell at me if you disagree. 240, what is the number? 242-5646. There it is, a little screen. So that's what I view as reproductive rights, where the individual controls whether or not they can impregnate someone or become impregnated. And if a woman and they become pregnant, then they have the option to terminate that pregnancy, at least up until somewhere mid or late pregnancy where the fetus becomes viable. The fetus has a nervous system.
Yeah, so where this started for me the thing I sent you is the reproductive rights people are responsible for the loss of Roe v. Wade, was my assertion. Because in fact, they were the ones that pushed the Dobbs case to go to the Supreme Court based on the Mississippi law that said that, you know, you couldn't have abortions after 15 or 16 weeks. Okay. The 15 or 16 weeks was longer than the original Roe v. Wade, which was expanded under the Casey decision. And my contention is that since Roe v. Wade was passed, the pro-life people were not happy. From 1974 on, people have kind of rebelled against that and tried to get it back to the courts, tried to get it overturned and whatever. And they pushed they pushed Casey, so they expanded the length of time within which a woman could have an abortion to fetal viability, which is roughly 24 weeks. And if they'd just been able to leave Mississippi alone, okay, it would have never gone to the courts. We would have still had Roe v. Wade with the Casey decision. But they didn't. They didn't. They pushed it. It wound up in the courts with a conservative Supreme Court that in fact came to the conclusion that abortion rights were not included in the Constitution, and they overturned Roe v. Wade. And turned it back to the states. So that had the pro-life people, so to speak, been willing to kind of leave things alone, either till they got the court
you mean the pro-choice, right? I'm sorry, when you say the pro-choice are the ones who appealed the decision, the circuit court decision, that upheld the Mississippi decision. You know, it was interesting, the Mississippi limitations on choice. Now, I'm not really familiar with Dobbs, I'll be honest with you, so I'm kind of ignorant on this. I really haven't followed it. I do, strongly support the right to choose. I do think that women should be able, at least, and I'm not dogmatic. I don't say if a woman is in her 8th month of pregnancy and the fetus is viable and the fetus is healthy, I would certainly not be someone who would say, oh, well, she should definitely have the right to abort that fetus. I have a real problem with that. If the fetus is, as I mentioned, has a nervous system and can feel pain, I'd be very loath to say that, except in cases where it's, the fetus or the mother or the fetus may have some sort of very, very serious condition, I would be loath to say that an abortion is okay under those in that situation. On the other hand, I'm not a woman, and so for that, I don't know where I would go there. But I'm not familiar with Dobbs. But what I thought you were going with this, Vernon, maybe you can explain, is what we've heard from a lot of people who are far to the left, like me, have said, is that the Democrats haven't really fought to protect the women's right to choose, that they want this to be a campaign issue, that instead of passing federal legislation when they had the opportunity to do so, they didn't. That they did not, in the wake of Dobbs, for example, pass a law that said that federal property can be used for abortions, and in fact, perhaps in military bases and forts, they would set up, facilities for that purpose. And the Democrats haven't done any of that. So I thought that was kind of more what your argument would be, which I am sympathetic to.
Well, that too. First of all, I think it's a tempest in a teapot when you look at the statistics regarding the abortion issue, and it's like we're talking about 2% of the pregnancy, something like that. Even if you make it 10. The second thing is what you just brought up is federal legislation allowing abortions with respect to the military, for example, or things involving people working for the government, taking it out of the hands of the states. And they haven't moved on that. Also, over 50 years, if people wanted this to be a federal issue, people should have been working toward a constitutional amendment. That's the way we do it. And I have no problem with that. I have problems with what I consider to be logical inconsistencies. On one hand, people will say, well, everybody's in favor of abortion, which I think to the most part, up to a certain point, within certain limits, they are. But then you have to ask yourself, if it's that clear, how come you have nearly half the country that's hostile toward abortion or outlawed it? We are in a place in this country where we're kind of really divided on central issues, almost 50-50. And you can make the other guy out to, that's just the way I see it. You can make the other guy out to be wrong and the bad guy, but if we can't sit down, come let us reason together, we're in trouble. There's a point, we were talking about Israel earlier, and you may stitch that in. When communication breaks down to that fundamental level, that you're that wrong, the guns come out. That's what the Civil War is about. And that's one of my fundamental issues along the line. Okay, I got it. Women are upset that you can't get an abortion in Texas, let's say. But what I would say is you wouldn't want Texas and California telling California that it couldn't have abortions. That's a states' right issue. And some of the states after the Dobbs decision changed their constitution to allow abortions. Some of them have it on the ballot now. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought Roe v. Wade was a bad law. She thought that the ruling should have been on the law, the particular law that affected the Roe v. Wade case, because she was worried about stuff like that. And that's why I put up that image earlier of emotion and logic, is when we go into the emotion realm, we go bananas. That's where I kind of look at it.
Well, I'm putting up this Politico story here, just the headline from April 9, where Trump, and he's clearly trying to have it both ways. Here he says it's up to the states. He's trying to distance himself from the rabid pro-right folks who just say no abortions under any circumstances. Clearly, he's trying to distance himself from there. But at the same point, he's also tweeted out how he should get credit from the pro-life people for the repeal of Roe v. Wade. I don't know if you can have both of them. He's trying. But what I would respond to what you said specifically, Vernon, and I hear what you're saying. I want people to come together. I think there are ways that we can come to agreements. I think there are very few people who take the no abortions should be legal under any circumstances. Virtually no one takes that position. And I think very few people even take the position that there should be the right to have an abortion up until delivery of a viable, healthy fetus. I don't think people take that view. Now you're showing this. I don't know. What is that supposed to reflect? I wish everyone was as objective and open-minded as I am and could see the truth as clearly as I do. Well, we all feel that way. We all wish that, but here's the problem with that point.
The point is that is every one of us is walking around with blinders, pointing the other guy. Open up your eyes. Can't you see the truth? We live in a time where everybody's does their research, and if you don't agree with them, you're wrong. And
what do you say, though? Let me just ask you my question. What do you say to those who would posit there are certain areas in our lives that should not be subject to government regulation? There's the right to speech. We pretty much agree, although tragically, we're seeing a lot of pushback now I'm seeing Democrats, I'm sure Republicans as well, trying to stop people from engaging in free speech on social media and elsewhere. But I think most people would say that's a place the government should basically stay out, except, in the very rare fire in a crowded theater or, trying to start a lynch mob or something. Most of us should have the right to say what we believe without fear of any government pushback. And there's the argument that includes medical treatment. We get to decide. The government doesn't tell us. If we don't want cancer treatments, we don't have to get them. And if we want to, we make a decision that having an abortion is the best thing for us, then we should be allowed to do that without the government deciding or telling us what to do.
Well, no, I agree with that. And the way you do that in Hal, the bottom line is there are us, the individuals, and there's the collective, the group. And the larger the group gets, the more disagreement you get on how things should be. And we've decided that the best way to deal with that is to elect people to make the rules by which the rest of us abide. I had this conversation with someone close to me not all that long ago, and they got upset about it. But I said, is the appropriate thing is in your state, it's your elected officials that made those laws, and you get them to change them. If you really want abortion available for everyone, you change the law. If your assertion to me is that your point of view reflects the majority in your state, then it's your job to get your legislators to deal with that.
But Vern, that sort of misses my point, I think. And I'm not trying to be dismissive of you, but my point is that there are some areas where we shouldn't let the legislature, we shouldn't let presidents or governors or anybody tell us what to do. And, to give a different example, I said speech, but another would be right to assemble, that we're allowed to gather together with people that we want to meet with. And the government can't say you can't.
No,
you two can't meet. You can't pass a law that says that. There are certain places that the government doesn't get to go. And what pro-choice advocates are saying is that at least in the early stages of a pregnancy, one area that the government should not get to go, period, end of story, is whether the pregnant woman has the baby or the pregnant girl has the baby.
I understand your arguments 100%. When they made the Constitution of the United States, though, is what I think a lot of people forget is we're fundamentally 50 different countries united in certain areas, like military. There's roads and coinage of money, and that's why they had the 10th Amendment. Those items not governed by the Constitution of the United States are left up to the individual states. Okay, if you want the United States to allow what you consider to be a fundamental right for everyone that lives under its umbrella, the way you do it is through a constitutional amendment. Otherwise, everyone's fighting about the right way to do it. That's
you're saying, just to be very clear, your position is simply the alleged right to have an abortion is not in the Constitution, and that the court, the original Roe court, got it wrong because they put a so-called right into the Constitution. They read it in there but it's not really there. If the founders, the framers, whatever you want to call them, had one of the original articles or one of the original, I guess, amendments had said, you get to choose if you want to have an abortion, the government doesn't get to tell you that would have been the end of the story, but they didn't do that. That's your position.
Well, yeah, have you read the Roe v. Wade, the original decision?
I have, but it was so long ago. You know, I know there's penumbras and things in there, but I don't.
Yeah, but basically, there was I downloaded it. I've been reading it, and I'm not a legal scholar. You're the legal scholar, Hal. I will defer to.
Legal scholarship industry's in a lot of trouble if I'm the legal scholar.
Listen, what the other thing I'm saying is that we're lazy. You cannot have a country of, for, and by the people where the people merely complain. And we've had Roe v. Wade was passed in 74, right? 50 years ago. It's been contentious since its beginning. You know, there's a lot of people that don't agree with it. And the Dobbs decision was only a matter of time. If you've watched the evolution of the country, you know, so how do you deal with conflicting views on how things should be handled in a civilized society? That's what I'm saying is, listen, I've had this conversation with my sisters. I'll tell you things that could make a lot of difference. You've heard all the arguments, well, we've got birth control and all that. Hold young men accountable. I'll tell you what, if some woman wants the public to pay for an abortion, she has to tell us who the father is. I'll tell you, a lot of young men would be a little bit more careful in knocking women up if the power of the state could come after them from the age of 18 till their kids were growing up and attach their wages. You know,
well, the state does do that. If you have a one night stand, if a guy has a one night stand with a woman, a girl, anyone who becomes pregnant, they are liable to take care of any child that results from that union, period. End of story. If the mom has the baby, she can sue on behalf of the child for child support up until the child's adulthood. And I don't know if I don't know what the laws are in terms of forcing the father to pay for the abortion. I don't know whether there's, what laws are in place for that. But yes, you put yourself at risk of very significant financial loss if you have unprotected sex, or frankly, if you have protected sex, because contraception doesn't work so well all the time.
Yeah. So already we've got about 3 or 4 things on the table beyond, should it be a woman's right? Shouldn't it be a woman's right? I'm saying, listen, I have no problem with it being a woman's right, but I'll tell you what, let's take it down. I don't know, take a state like where the Amish live. Are you going to tell them what they should or shouldn't do within their own community? And true.
No, but that's true. The Amish have a lot of self-governing rights, but under Roe, if an Amish girl or woman became pregnant, she could go to a provider, an abortion provider, and get an abortion, and there's nothing legally that the Amish elders could do. Frankly, I don't know what the Amish. I don't think the Amish are necessarily opposed to abortion, though, are they? I don't know what the rules are.
No, I don't. Here's one of the problems that struck me many years when I was in graduate school is there's such a tendency to get caught up in the details of the examples. All of a sudden, my point is what gives, just as California wouldn't want Georgia, Texas, any of these states that don't allow abortions, telling them they couldn't allow abortions. Okay, what gives California the right to tell Texas and Georgia or some of these other states who have made laws regarding abortions that they can't make them? I'm saying if they've made the law, that's a reflection of the population. And if it's not, the people in that state need to deal with it.
Right. I'm just but my response to that, Vernon, is that's fine if you think the right to have an abortion, or whether you get to have an abortion or have the ability to have an abortion, should be up to the people, up to the state in which you live. But if you take a position, which obviously many do, for example, if you take a position and I think it's the law, although I'm not happy with the way the courts interpreted it, that the state doesn't get to torture you. The state doesn't get to decide we want to torture Hal because we don't like what he's saying. They can't pass that law. That law would be invalidated because for two reasons. One, the state can't punish someone for what they say, and B, one, two, because torture is supposedly illegal. Cruel and unusual punishment is unconstitutional. So if you take the position that the right to have an abortion is part of your rights under the Constitution, then states can't ban it.
Yeah, but that's what the courts just ruled, is it's not your right under the United States Constitution.
So here's where I think, again, it gets really interesting in terms of the upcoming election. If you take the position that it's, not a constitutional right, that it's not in the Constitution right now, then I think you could make the argument, Vernon, as you do, that Democrats aren't necessarily better than Republicans because, like we've just said, they haven't made it legal on federal property, which they could have done. They didn't push for a statute or law that would have made it the law of the land. And you look at some of the Republicans running for office in Maryland, where Alsobrooks is leading, but by relatively narrow margin. The Republican there, former Governor Hogan, has been very clear that he supports the right to choose, and he would, in fact, vote in favor of a law if it came before him in the Senate. I have no reason to doubt that. Even in Wisconsin, where you have a more conservative, and I'll bring you right into this, but I just want to make these points. Even in Wisconsin, where you have a more conservative option, this guy Hovde, who in the past has been against abortion rights, has pretty much said, no, we don't support them. I don't support them. He is now saying that he would not ban abortion, at least early in a pregnancy. So if you think it's not and shouldn't be ever, or unless there's it shouldn't be viewed as part of the Constitution, I think you have a legitimate argument. Even Trump is saying, hey, let the states decide. But if you think it is a constitutional right that the court got right once and now has gone wrong, then shouldn't you vote for Democrats? Because they'll support justices, or they'll vote against justices like the Trump justices.
Well, Hal, you just reframed this. It's independent of what I think, whether it's constitutional or not. In our system, our courts have decided that this determination is relegated to the states. And that's another thing that I made a comment to you that led to the show, is that when, Kamala, whatever, says what she's going to do about abortion, that's not within the power of the president. That was another thing I was going to say. People can say all this stuff in terms of what they're going to do. The courts have said that that's not something within the power of Congress. It's unconstitutional. That's a state thing. So when you say, if I believe this or that, it's independent of what I believe. A lot of people believe the court got it wrong. Under our system of government, like the court decision or not, that's how the courts decided. A lot of people did not like the decision of the court that passed Roe v. Wade, made abortion legal. A lot of people didn't like that one either. And we've lived for 50 years under that law. This has been an ongoing struggle in humankind. The rights of the individual versus the rights of the collective or the group or the society to determine certain behaviors of the group. And that's why I say is, if someone's claim is in fact that 76% of the population are really in favor of this, then it should be an easy constitutional amendment.
I'm not saying you're wrong, Vernon. I'm really, because I'm not, on balance, I do lean towards the view that Roe was correctly decided, but I'm not dogmatic about it. There's a lot of things I'm dogmatic about. I'm dogmatic about our support for Israel. I'm against it. I don't have any doubt in my mind. Really, I have no doubt. Zero. None. Nada. That we shouldn't be sending one bomb to Israel. They should all be gone. That anything that goes to Israel should be gone. That's easy for me. This one, I see your argument. I see your point. I think it's reasonable. But I also think it's reasonable to say there are some aspects of our lives that should be beyond the reach of the government.
Agree. Why do you say that like I don't agree?
Because you don't agree that one of the aspects of our lives that should be beyond the reach of the government under the current system that we live in includes whether a woman wants to have an abortion or not and can have that abortion.
So you're against democracy.
I am in some areas, yes. In some places, that's the Constitution. The Constitution is against democracy to the extent that the public wants to say draw and quarter somebody in the town square. You can't do that.
Well, I don't have any problem with that, Hal. I'm just trying to keep people are in favor of democracy's under attack. You got to save the democracy when it serves or does what they want. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy here. There's many other things going on. Like I say, you and I are having a conversation right now that's been around for a long time. The arguments go back and forth. When it's a fetus, when it's, and that's what Roe v. Wade was, hey, there's a point at which the development of the embryo is a point that you can't just call it a part of a woman's body. So it's no longer just her choice. The civilized society has some responsibility in protecting the rights of the evolving human being in its mother's uterus, even though she is an independent woman. And in Roe v. Wade, they set that as first trimester. Along the line, people didn't like that. Oh, that's just too early. I've always thought, well, wait a second, except for there are occasional cases that would need to be dealt with one by one, where women have gone almost all the way through a pregnancy without knowing they're pregnant, or so I've been told. Those are unusual, but for the most part, my understanding, I'm not a woman, is that most women, when they miss a period, think they might be pregnant. If they even
before they may not feel, they get morning sickness, which could be at any time of day, as I understand it. Again, we should be talking this way. Vernon, we'll be like, who are those two old guys, those two old farts talking about this? But,
listen, I'll have this conversation with any woman out there. Maybe I'm wrong. If a woman misses 2 periods, is she suspect? If she misses 3 periods, should she be suspect? Well, 3, that's the first Roe standard, roughly 14 weeks. Roughly 14 weeks. You're not suspicious that you might be pregnant, Hal, I was thinking this morning, I'm going to say a couple things that are just nonsense, okay? But there is that biblical injunction, when I was a child, I thought as a child. When I grew up and became a man, I had to start thinking like a man. We're a bunch of children. The other thing I've often thought is the only difference between being young and an adult. Whoa, I'm taking up the whole screen there. Young and as an adult is there's no teacher at the front of the classroom anymore. So where does personal responsibility come in? Listen, I don't care.
No, these are really tough questions. I appreciate this, Vernon, very much, because I do think that on both sides of this issue, advocates do tend to simplify. But if I say that, I'm certain to hear from certainly the pro-choice folks that I have some nerve, some crust as a guy to be telling them what's important to them. And I'm like, well, no, I support the right to choose very much, but I hear what you're saying. It's not so clear cut, at least certainly under the way the Constitution is written. And I think people become so set in their ways and so dogmatic that they make it more difficult, right? They make it more impossible to come to the resolution that they would want.
Sure. I have no question or doubt about that, Hal. What I'm just there again, that's why I put that one up. When you start to get into, if I say that most of the arguments I've raised and most of the things I've said here are in the realm of logic, is what gives California wouldn't want Texas to tell it how to deal with an abortion. What makes California think that it has the right to tell Texas how to deal with abortion? Certainly, the men only in Texas are not sufficient, in my opinion. I wouldn't think would be sufficient to have a law that prohibits abortion. A lot of the women there must agree with it as well. When you start looking at that, that's my concern.
Well, look, in Kansas, the very conservative state where I think anti-choice or pro-life activists were quite confident they would be able to outlaw abortion, ban it. There was a referendum and it failed miserably. Most Kansans did not want abortion outlawed in their state. I don't know what the law is now, and the legislature may have gone against that referendum, but it was clear that the sentiment of the voters was not in favor of some kind of law that makes it illegal to have an abortion.
Yeah, and Hal, this is the other thing I'd say is everything you can find all that stuff for the most part when I deal with people in terms of this discussion. Many of them have never thought of the points that I just hit you with. You can look up. I mean, there's more than ample information on the internet from legitimate sources telling you what the laws in every state are, to the extent that there's no abortion under any circumstances, which is very, very few. And to the states that are hostile toward it, to the ones that allow it are kind of ambivalent, to the ones that are for it, you can find all.
I mean, I would argue. Let me just interrupt you for a second. I want to move on to some other topics because we're not going to focus just on abortion, but also I think on how bad things are around the world and in this country too. But just on that one issue, I don't know. Are there states where I guess it's the law in Texas. You can't have an abortion unless there's some approval by the state under certain circumstances. No, don't those laws? I mean, I get. Could a state pass a law that makes it so impossible to have an abortion, in your opinion, that it could be declared unconstitutional? I understand the right to have an abortion, in your view, is not in the Constitution. Certainly the states or some type of congressional action could put it in the Constitution. You wouldn't oppose that if it was done. But do you think there are laws that states could impose that you would say this offends the Constitution the other direction?
It's not my point of view that it's not in the Constitution. It's been determined by the courts. Okay.
Well, were the courts right or wrong to make that decision? Because the court decided in 1973 that it was in the Constitution. Was the court wrong then, and it's right now?
They didn't really. They really didn't. They kind of didn't really say that. We don't have time to go into all that. They kind of did a bunch of hand waving, and at the end it says, "Well, kind of this is." I think, in my opinion, they legislated from the bench when they came up with Roe v. Wade, and I say Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought they made a terrible mistake that would lead to a lot of the problems down the line. We've had 50 years we've been arguing about it rather than resolving the issue. But hit me with your question again. I had a brain fart on that.
Could a state pass a law or have states pass laws that, in your view, put such a burden on the ability to have an abortion, they make it so impossible that it violates the Constitution?
I'm sure they probably could, and that should be challenged then.
It certainly would seem to me that in cases where the pregnant woman or girl's life is in grave danger. We've seen it's too difficult. It's doctors should be able to go forward without having to worry about getting state or state approval. I don't know how that doesn't, because if you say no, then aren't you violating the woman's right or the girl's right to life? If you say there's ultimately you certainly would think there's a right to the state government doesn't get to take away your life. And if you say a doctor can't perform a needed surgery, that seems pretty
totally agree. But here's the other thing. When you start to look at the cases like the gal in Georgia that died.
Yeah.
Because she, you start looking into all of that. There's so much more to the story, and we're not going to go into it now. Maybe we'll do another show, or maybe I'll tell you more of it off air. But it's framed in a way that leaves out a lot of the details. Okay. Yeah. And listen, rather than talk about it, if we'd been on it for 50 years, as the public perception and feeling toward abortion, especially within the earlier stages, has changed over time, I think it would have been possible to get a constitutional amendment. And if your claim is that the country at large feels that now, you need to jump on it. And as you know, being a lawyer, the wheels of justice move slowly, but they move steadily. I mean, we're not going to resolve these issues overnight. Listen, here's one. At the moment of birth, okay, I could say, and I'll make an argument that a child is still an unviable tissue mass. You can't leave a baby that's newly born unattended. It's an unviable tissue mass. You can really push these arguments a long ways, and I think I read.
Well, I don't. I think that's right. I mean, we have to get into a debate then. Well, is the child viable because they can survive outside the mother? They no longer need the mother to survive, which is true even before birth, right? I mean, if you have a healthy fetus in the 8th or 9th month, the fetus doesn't need the mother to survive at that point.
Well, it doesn't need the mother. It needs some sort of assistance.
Right.
And I don't really. Listen, I just posted something that, in the bottom line, is if someone wants to get into an emotive argument with me, I can be equally as ridiculous in the points I bring up. And that's the problem when you start arguing in terms of emotion, in my opinion, is people, we're all over the place, all of us. I'm not immune to this. I'm not claiming that I'm Mr. Spock or something. I'm just putting out to you some of the thoughts that have come up over time regarding this issue that's been around for most of my life.
Well, are you claiming to be Dr. Spock? Because he was a famous gynecologist, obstetrician. No. So
I wish I had the ability of Mr. Spock in the mind meld, though.
All right, let's move on. We're obviously not going to settle this, but an important conversation. And I agree. My takeaway from this really, Vernon, is, again, let's listen to each other a little more. I think that's what I'm trying to do on my show, is build dialogue. And I know you kind of got that sense yesterday when watching the program I did with Arlen. I really appreciated that you felt that I was being a good listener and a good conversationalist, if that's what you thought, because that's what I'm trying to do, and I don't always feel that I accomplished that by any means.
Yeah. Well, as I said to you, I love that line from the song, "For what it's worth, nobody's right if everybody's wrong." And that's basically where I come from, is that it's the old Paul Harvey thing, is the rest, there's always the rest of the story. And when you're listening to a person with a passionate point of view, they're never going to give you the opposite arguments. They're always going to paint the picture in a way that makes sense and makes their point seem rational and logical. That's just the way it is. And we all need to look at everything involved. That's how I see the world.
Well, I think what you said is so true. That's one of the reasons I left law, is because I couldn't stand that as an advocate. My job was always to promote one particular position and to shade every other position. I just couldn't stand that. That's just not who I am. Yeah. Working for the government was a little better because you aren't as dogmatic. For example, if you prosecute a case, some prosecutors view it as, if I'm prosecuting someone's in front of me, my job is to convict them. But that was never my view. My view was my job is to come up with the best result, which might or might not mean conviction or guilty finding or what have you. It might mean we drop charges, we drop the case. It might mean a lot of other things. And that's what I liked better about being a government lawyer, which when you're in private practice, you represent, and I didn't do much. I didn't really do criminal law, but I did some family law, and there were some overlap. But if you represent a defendant, your job is to get them off, no matter what, no matter how. And that includes guilty as sin defendants, people who are killers, serial killers.
Yeah.
I could never do that. I would never feel good about doing that.
The argument there, of course, is that you need people willing to do that for the system to work.
That may be true, but I think there probably are better ways to go about doing it.
Well, maybe to that end, I just want to throw this in real quick. A lot of people are against the death penalty. I certainly understand that. I'm in liberal Santa Cruz, and I was asked to be on a panel years ago to defend it. Okay. One of the things that I think is a travesty is when there's a death penalty case, that we, the people, don't give the person that's on trial in a death penalty case defense as good as O.J. Simpson was able to pay for, because of what's at stake. They're owed the best because of the consequences of the decision, not just some public defender it may be inexperienced or something. If we're going to say we're going to take your life for a crime, we owe you even if you committed it, we owe you the best defense that money can buy.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Vernon. I just want to tell you, I was listening to everything you said. I heard that very clearly. I'm going to respond to what you said about the best defense you can get and point to the OJ trial, because I had an interesting question about that to a public defender who's a hugely successful lawyer right now and making many millions a year, probably 8 figures. And as a matter of fact, she's doing that well. But I just wanted to see how much time we had left. And we've gone about 45 minutes. I didn't realize this was quite a conversation. I wanted to get into some of the other topics. You saw the Gaza thumbnail. We'll maybe get into that. But what you said about having the best defense, and I would agree with you if we're going to put someone to death, or if that's a possibility. That's one of the reasons I don't think we should have a death penalty, and I think we should have shorter prison sentences and all that, except in cases where people are clearly cannot be released under any circumstances consistent with protection for the public, like serial killers and other very violent people like that. But I did ask this question of that exact attorney that I mentioned, who's making so much money, who's so successful right now, when she was talking about OJ, and she acknowledged, she said, yeah, he's guilty, but that's the prosecutor's job, and they failed. Mm-hmm. So I said to her, this was in a panel, and she didn't like this question. She was very nasty. She's nasty. She's not a nice person. I hope people don't know who I'm talking about. Maybe they can figure it out. But I said in this panel, so are you saying we should spend a whole lot more on defense lawyers so we can get so more guilty people like OJ can be can be, exonerated, can be set free and get away with their crimes? And the response was, well, that's a really stupid question, because she didn't like the way I phrased it. Yeah. But yes, I do think we should spend more for public defenders. So I think, Lloyd, we have people who are convicted wrongly of crimes, and it's terrible. And to me, that's more a fault of the prosecutor than the defense lawyer. But we probably do need to spend more to protect people who are accused of crimes. But the problem is there's always that yin and yang. You spend more and more on defense lawyers, and pretty soon you get more and more guilty people walking free. A better solution, in my view, is to not have such horribly draconian punishments.
I don't have any problem with that.
And to have prosecutors who are tasked much more and pushed to do justice, not just to look at their batting average or their conviction rate.
Yeah, I was very, very clearly focused on that one. How, for death penalty cases, if you're going to take someone's life, you need to provide them with the best defense. It shouldn't be just something that someone like OJ could pull off.
100%, Vernon, no argument. So I just showed this up here, and this is such an awful situation. We talked about this beforehand, and you mentioned for what it's worth, and nobody's right if everyone's wrong. I kind of say Israel's the one that's wrong. I just do say it. They've invaded Lebanon now. They're killing people there, left, right, and center, preventing folks from leaving the country. Rather than, though, getting into a debate about that, is it true that nobody's right, or can we blame everyone? I kind of want to more, because we don't have a lot of time. Just get your thoughts. I mean, are things that bad? I mean, you've seen more than I've. You fought in Vietnam, so you saw something really terrible there. We've got multiple very deadly conflicts around the world. Is this obviously it could get worse, but is this, how bad does it rate compared to what you've seen in your lifetime?
Well, I was combat support, so I was in pretty good shape in Vietnam. So I never pull a Tim Walz. I never say, I'm sorry about that.
I'm not really clear on this one either. What exactly, there's some kind of stolen valor thing going on with him. Is that right?
Oh, no. I'd give him a break. What he said is like the weapon I carried in war, and he never went to a combat zone. Yeah, I'm just making a distinction. The best movie I've seen regarding a sense of Vietnam is Apocalypse Now, because it's just the sheer craziness depicted in the thing. It was I spent 2 years there. They were a surreal 2 years. I was not infantry. I was not walking rice paddies. I was not on, Hamburger Hill, any of that stuff. So I was in pretty good shape, but it was crazy. We'd get mortared sometimes. So the point is, I don't want to misrepresent myself, but that's the stolen valor they're talking about, is, someone that comes back from a combat zone and pretends to have been one of the guys that's out there being shot at, beat up. He never carried a weapon in a combat zone. I know it sounded good. He was making a point about assault weapons and all that. That's what people are talking about in terms of Tim Walz, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, again, that was a very, very terrible, ugly time in American history, and a war that worked out as badly as it possibly could in so many different ways. Not that they ever, there's always a lot of unintended consequences. Sometimes you feel like, well, this was a war that had to be fought. I look at the Civil War. That's sort of my view. Same with World War II. But that isn't the consensus on Vietnam, or my view. We're now seeing, I put up the slide, it's up there now, how badly things are going in Ukraine. And without my, I've been against that war, but, again, even if for those who support it, I think you have to look at what's happening and say, this is not what we were hoping for. This is not a result 2+ years, 2.5 years in, that was consistent with what we would have liked to see at this point. So, and there's more bad stuff too. I'm just looking at the war, but we have these terrible, once in a decade hurricanes too, one after the other, Vernon. So, I mean, how do you sum it all up as you look back on your life, and this is where we are right now?
I think we have a hard time dealing with an unpredictable world in which bad things happen.
Are things getting worse, though? I understand bad things happen, but are we looking at badder and badder things happening?
Well, in terms of the potential for war, clearly, people talked about maybe them using nukes during Vietnam, which would have been terrible. But I think that we are in a powder keg situation. When I look at the size of Israel on a map and all that's gone on there, and that's a real powder keg part of the world. And I think it's a mistake to push Putin. I've heard stuff. I think it was Trudeau say that we should fire on Russia. That's crazy talk. That's absolute crazy talk. In my opinion, we don't want the kind of war that we could get into that involves nukes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I view both of these situations as very, very significant failures of the Harris-Biden administration.
Yeah. And the problem is there again, I don't know if these are very complicated situations. There's a term that I just ran into that I hear coming out a lot more, and it's called emergence. And that is phenomenon that emerge when all the conditions are right. They don't understand it, but it's like with our AI, if we watch enough patterns, we see certain things happen. Let's say if we're watching traffic in intersections, that can tell us something about how to deal with the flow of traffic when it gets to a certain point. Very interesting phenomenon. And what I'm afraid of there, it's a term that you hear a lot in terms of climate change, is tipping points. It's when you get to certain places, it can be, it's harder to reel it all in. That's one of the things that it's bothered me a lot of times about when I hear any administration talk big. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned climate change. I have up the slide there. Right now, Tampa is bracing for this latest Hurricane Milton to make land tomorrow. And Milton was a Cat 5 hurricane, one of the most powerful we've ever seen. It was downgraded, but I heard before I came live, I don't know, where they're saying it may boost itself up because it's back over open water, where it's very warm. Yep. So this could be the most powerful hurricane to hit Tampa in over 100 years, according to the New York Times. We just got over, I mean, it's not over, right? What the Southeast is dealing with as a result of Hurricane Helene isn't even over with. So again, these are storms of the century we're seeing in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, and hitting not the exact same area, but Asheville and Western North Carolina ain't that far from Tampa, to be perfectly honest with you. So we're seeing, a significant harm done, fault coming back up. And they say that Milton is very big. It's not just like it's powerful. It's not like a compact puncher or fighter who packs a wallop, but only in a smaller area. This is like a heavyweight. If I can use that analogy. So let me play this video here if I can, just of Helene. And Biden getting a lot of blowback, a lot of criticism for handling of Helene. I think they addressed that in the CNN. I want to just play it for you real quick in the audience and then get some thoughts from you, Vernon.
Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene and the rising death toll, with more than 200 people now confirmed dead, hundreds more still missing. Helene, now the deadliest hurricane to hit the mainland U.S. since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. President Biden and Vice President Harris touring hard-hit communities across the Southeast, and earlier this week deploying active duty troops. Donald Trump preparing to make his second visit to Georgia today and claiming without evidence that the Biden administration is withholding aid from states including Georgia and North Carolina.
They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them this season. You know, they're trying to get them on the voters' roll. We cannot let that happen.
The White House pushing back against those allegations, releasing a statement that says this, quote, "This is false. The Disaster Relief Fund is specifically appropriated by Congress to prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate impacts of natural disasters. It is completely separate from other grant programs administered by FEMA for DHS." Our panel.
All right, so I just wanted to play that, including, showing the damage, which is so tremendous and obviously can't show all that, but also how Trump is trying to use it dishonestly for political gain. And I got to just say, Vernon, before I get your take, when I talk to Arlen like I did yesterday and I play clips of Harris, I'm just thinking I could never vote for her. And I feel exactly the same way when I play clips of Trump. And so, I won't vote for either one. But it just astonishes me that these are the, quote, best, unquote, candidates we can come up with in very, very difficult, dangerous times, as you've mentioned.
That's a reflection of us, Hal. The people that run are a reflection of us and our lack of participation. My wife used to say, people say you need to run better candidates. In this country, we don't force people to run. And unfortunately, people that get into the political system all the time don't necessarily have the best of motives.
Is it fair, though, to blame the voters? And I'll go to both, because Harris she didn't win any votes in this cycle. She didn't win any 4 years ago. She was anointed by the Democratic elites who, I guess, view her as tractable, somebody who will not do anything that will hurt them. And with regard to Trump, I think a lot of voters, as much as people say, oh, he's a Pied Piper and he's a Swami and all that, I think a lot of people don't particularly love Trump, but they think, well, he's better than the alternative, just as I think they thought back in 2016 when he was running against Marco and those people.
Well, that's something I often say when I've been asked, how can people stand that man? And I say, well, almost half the country.
Look at the alternative, right?
Yeah.
It's a choice, and these are two really bad choices, as I see it.
Did you know, Hal, that of all the 50 states, that only 32 of them post party affiliation demographics?
What does that mean? You mean they don't tell you?
That means if you want to find out how many people are registered Democrats and versus Republicans, you can only get that data versus independents. Only 32 states report that. I'm going someplace with this.
Okay. Go. Keep going. Go.
Okay. So, because I believe in truth and in presentation. So, but when you look at the results tabulated for the places we have the data, roughly 49%, 49 million are registered Democrats, and roughly 39 million are registered Republicans. Okay. What that means is you've got to have, even if it was totally along party lines, you had 100% Democrats voting for the Democratic candidate and all the Republicans voting for Trump, you fall 25% short. You got to make up a 25% difference there to get even. So that what the bottom line is, when I hear people like Harlan saying, you know, those Trump voters, what he's doing, he's trashing a lot of people that are not MAGA. That, as you said, don't necessarily like Trump, but he's the lesser of two evils for whatever reason. And that's something I've been harping on since 2016. I've got many people that I know personally that can't stand Trump. I don't expect them to stand Trump. And can you explain those Trump people to me? I say, no, I can't, but you got to remember, half the country, when you got half the country voting for the man, when you go that bananas, what you're saying is half your fellow countrymen are crazy, and they think you're as crazy as they do.
100% on that, but I think I can understand, in a way, Vernon, the Trump voter better than I can understand the Harris voter. At least, well, let me say it a little differently. I could understand the Trump voter in 2016 a lot better than I could understand the Hillary primary voter in 2016. Mm-hmm. I thought that was so clear cut that Bernie was a superior option. I didn't think they were, they weren't in the same room. Whereas I thought in 2016, when it came to Trump versus Hillary, it's a toss up. I keep that opinion hasn't changed. It's not like I say, oh, look at all the bad things Trump did, I was wrong. No, I'm not convinced Hillary would have been a less bad president. But we've gone an hour, but I really want to get your take on this. So we've got the hurricanes, we've got war that is very, very serious and getting worse in powder keg areas of the world. So are things worse? I mean, I think the question kind of answers itself, but can you put this in perspective a little bit?
Well, it's funny. I just watched a documentary on the Beatles touring years last night. It was on Hulu. It was a really great documentary by Ron Howard. And my brother is a docent for the Nixon Library. And when you go in there, they have a room that shows, Nixon's past, and people forget how bad the 60s were. The turmoil in this country, and it was crazy how. And as I'm watching all that stuff, I'm thinking, yeah, it was kind of almost equally bad there. There was civil rights stuff going on. There was Vietnam going on. We were all crazy. The things that have changed, I think that it's more what's going on in the Ukraine and in Israel due to our advancement in weapon technology. Added a level of danger, but in terms of our inability to get along, so to speak, I don't know that it's any worse now than it was then. I just know that we're more plugged in now and inundated in our face all the time what's going on around the world in Gaza and this and that. So certainly there's an appearance of that. I'm not sure it's any worse when I walk out my front door into life.
All right, let me ask you, let me kind of put you on the spot a little bit, Vernon, here. One of the areas where you and I have disagreed, I think, at least in terms of rhetoric, is what I call the climate holocaust. And you don't like that term. You've kind of...
I don't mind it. I just think it's wrong.
Well, you've taken issue with it. You've taken issue with my using that term.
Yeah, I think it's hyperbolic.
Do you okay. When you see these killer hurricanes that have been attributed by climatologists to climate crisis, do you start thinking, maybe this is more serious than I've in the thought it was?
Sometimes I think that, but the first thing I do when I see something like that, Hal, is I go to try and look and see what the record of hurricanes is and has been over the last 100 years. And I downloaded that last night, and I didn't get to fully analyze it. At first, because of the time periods, it had data for 2000 through 2024, a 5-year period. And then the next region was a 10-year period. But at first, it didn't look like it was any worse in terms of deaths, damage, or whatever. But I got to sort out the 5-year period. So I'm not really sure. and I actually looked up some charts, and it doesn't look like it's particularly all that much worse.
Well, there were some really serious hurricanes over 100 years ago. I remember, I don't remember it, but I remember reading about one that hit Galveston around 1910, 1911, that was remarkably destructive. So I think that supports what you're saying. And I think what, again, the climatologists are saying is that we are having more and bigger storms. It's not as though we didn't have them in the past, but there are more of them, and they're more powerful.
Yeah, and the problem. Okay, I'm just another guy on the block. I could give you
maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not correct, and I look forward to your analysis. I'm just saying what I've heard.
My wife and family have been on me for years because I've posted on Facebook that I'm a proud high school dropout. I did that to see if they were selling my email address, so I'd get things, get your GED. I've been following a lot of this stuff since 1990, when I was overwhelmed by how does someone determine what's being said in the news, and it happened to start off with ozone. And I think you've got short-term temperature or climate things. Climate is defined as periods of 30 years or longer. Okay. And so that in my lifetime, I'm 77, we're into a third climate cycle. Okay. We're 2 years, about halfway through. So, when you do experiments in the lab, you typically do them in triplicate to see what's going on. So I don't, when you look geologically, it's cooler now. We're still in a very cool period. You were almost 2 degrees cooler than we were geologically for a long time ago. I don't know. I've not seen papers that clearly delineate how a matter of a couple degrees temperature, how you quantify that with hurricanes and stuff. So I'm skeptical about that, a lot of that stuff. And I could send you. So I don't know. I don't think that it's necessarily any worse. And I was having a conversation with my brother the other day regarding that. We'll see what happens when this next one hits land. We don't know how this next one's going to be because they peter out too.
It's true. All right, man, that's going to do it. I really just want to, again, thank you for joining me, Vernon. A lot of fun. I think we thrashed through some really important issues. Probably didn't solve them. I'll be back tomorrow.
That's why I'm an iconoclast,
You are the iconoclast.
Yeah.
You're not the thought leader, though. That's Arlen, but you're an iconoclast. Tomorrow, Chuck Pinocchio, healthcare advocate, single-payer healthcare advocate, joins us again, friend of the show. Vernon, thanks again. Unless you got anything else, anything on your mind you want to share? I didn't ask you this, and I should have, but I want to do it now, make clear. You are a periodic host, and I've done your show. Are you doing anything? Are you still doing that? I mean, is that kind of off the charts
That's
now?
kind of off the grid, but I've also thought about doing podcasts. People want me to. Part of it being an iconoclast, I kind of resist it because everybody thinks that they're important, have something to say, and so I kind of resist joining the crowd.
I do. I think I have something important. I know. Well, that's the problem, right?
Which is, and you asked me at the beginning of the show, are we making any difference? And I'm thinking, okay, what is it? Mr. Beast has 240 million subscribers.
It's incredible. And that's like the worst crap, isn't it? I don't know. Sorry, Mr. Beast, but totally uninteresting to me.
Those of us that may care about what's going on, we're not even touching the scale down there. We don't even make it when we got 5 million.
No. I wish, I wish I had 500 at this point. I'll see you soon, Vern. We'll talk again. You have a great afternoon.
I'd be on board if you'd invite me, but I want to say this.
You're open invitation. You'll get your word in, but I want to say you're always welcome. You can just let me know. You can say, hey, Hal, I'm going to come on this afternoon if you want. I can't always promise you an opening, but if I have one, you're always welcome.
this is what I want your listening audience to know, that you and I crossed paths, I don't know, sometime around 5 years ago, maybe 6, something like that. And you came at me hard in the beginning.
I sure did.
Which is, I don't mind that. I take it as a badge of honor because I'll try and hold my own. But what I want your audience to know, people that might not know you, is that you are passionate about what you believe in. Certainly, whether it be climate change or what you call, going on in Gaza right now, the Holocaust there. But you are at least one of the most passionate, open-minded, passionate people that I know that's willing to go toe to toe. And we need more of that in the world, not for people to not be passionate in what they believe, but people to be willing to hear each other out, to address the arguments that are on the table, if nothing else, to become clear on what we do agree on, what we don't agree on, and determine what we're going to do to move forward in those things. Because if, as long as the table's open for dialogue, there's movement. As I said, though, I really believe this, war is the ultimate breakdown of communication. When you finally say, you're wrong, I'm right, and I have I have no tolerance for you, nothing to do. You need to be obliterated. That's when the guns come out. And the problem is it ain't like in the movies. I mean, people do die, people do get, so
they're maimed, they're in pain for the rest of their lives. They become widows and widowers. They lose their children. They become orphans. It's all so real and so horrific. Vernon, thanks so much, man. Again, I just appreciate you coming on board, and I appreciate the online disagreements as well as the agreements.
Listen, I don't even know that we disagree that much. We just haven't got the connection.
We disagree. There's a few. We disagree on a few things. All right, man. Listen, let me run. I got to go. I actually got to go meet somebody soon. The show went really long. It didn't actually go that long. It went a little long, but it went late because I had some tech problems that I created. So
you got an important thing.
So we'll see you soon. Thanks. And I'll be back tomorrow. Don't forget Chuck Pinocchio. We'll talk healthcare.
Thanks, Hal.